Alright, what's going on, guys? So, as coincidence would have it, the day after making a video about how silent things have been regarding Elder Scrolls 6, we get one of the biggest days of Elder Scrolls leaks in the past decade. Now, comparatively, since things have been radio silent during that time, it doesn't take much, but there is a good amount of content here that reveals a lot of new things about Elder Scrolls 6 if this is real, and based off of the leaker's credibility, it does seem like it could be. The internet has been ablaze with all of this today, and we have a lot to break down and get through, so I'm not going to waste much of your time. But as we get started, if you want to stay up to date on all things Elder Scrolls 6, as well as Souls-like content, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's get into it. Now, there were several leaks that happened overnight, but the main one that kind of kicked things off and seemingly inspired others to release information was a video from the insider Ecstasis. And you're probably wondering, well, who the heck is this guy and why does he know things about Elder Scrolls 6? Well, it's a bit complicated. Now, Ecstasis here has the username Fake Insider, but don't let that fool you. This guy kind of has been going wild recently with a lot of leaks that have almost all turned out to be true, including the entirety of TGA before it happened this December, including Elden Ring Night Rain, which almost nobody had any clue about whatsoever. To compound with that, which has led many people to believe that the Elder Scrolls 6 information we're about to discuss is true, is that this guy has been particularly on the nose with things relating to Microsoft. Now, in the past, Ecstasis has gotten things wrong. He does not have a 100% track record. Now, I don't know the specifics of what he's gotten wrong, but what we can't deny is that this guy does have access to insider information in some capacity and has frequently been correct. Now, having said that, as always when talking about leaks and rumors, do not assume this to be absolutely true. Take it with a grain of salt. We don't have any videos here, we don't have any images. All we have is information from word of mouth. And Ecstasis himself has stated that this is secondhand information, but he trusts it. So as a viewer, just consider this a rumor, but we're gonna break it down. Let's take a look at what Ecstasis had to say. Firstly, the game is going to be more immersive with fast loading times. Now, I would sure hope so with modern hardware that yeah, we have fasting load times and the game is more immersive. Now, the last Elder Scrolls game, Skyrim, was an extremely immersive game, one of the most immersive games I've ever played. But I didn't get that feeling from Starfield, so I hope they go back to the roots with what made games like Oblivion and Skyrim so immersive in their worlds, and do a good job at making it feel alive. Secondly, the game takes place in Hammerfell and High Rock. Now, this was the obvious assumption that everyone has been making since the game was announced. We have had more than a few hints from Bethesda themselves that this will be the case, including this tweet from the Elder Scrolls account, which hints at that portion of the map, Pinterest boards of Bethesda employees with lots of desert-themed environments, and others posting pictures of themselves in desert garbs. But beyond that, it's just the obvious choice for the next setting. It's one of the major portions of Tamriel that hasn't been majorly explored in an expansive title, and just makes a lot of sense more than anything. So this portion of the leak is not surprising whatsoever. But here's where things get interesting. The game will have naval battles, shipbuilding inspired by Starfield, and marine/underwater exploration, explorable islands off the coast. Okay, so there's a lot to talk about here. If we do look at Starfield as a sort of tech demo for new features coming in the Elder Scrolls 6, then I do think things like ships are the natural progression. Now, when it comes to Starfield, many people did think that the shipbuilding tech and the space battles were the best part of that game, and it was very expansive. So if they do translate that into the Elder Scrolls 6, I do think this could be a high point of the game and a great way to innovate going forward, and it could translate very easily. I'm sure people would love to build their own pirate ship in an Elder Scrolls game. That would be a good way to give in-game content as well as longevity, and that is a part of the Elder Scrolls games that hasn't been super expanded upon, such as personal property. You know, we have houses in the games and horses, but the feature is very bare bones. Even with the Hearthstone DLC, there is a lot of room for improvement there, and shipbuilding would fill that gap. But here's the part of this that scares me. Explorable islands off the coast. Please do not let this be like the planets in Starfield. If they're going to use procedural generation and AI to make these islands, then I'd almost just rather them not do it at all. Because they tried it in Starfield, and those planets were the most boring, lifeless, and pointless things to explore that made the whole game feel dead. What made Skyrim exploration so good was that you always had an adventure around every corner. There's no reason to fill space if it doesn't serve a purpose for the rest of the game. Now, if these islands are handcrafted and tie into quests from the mainland, then sure, by all means. But if they're just there to fill arbitrary space that doesn't need to exist in the first place, then don't put it in the game. And I hope they learned that lesson from Starfield. Dragons will return. Cool. I love the dragons. They played a great role in Skyrim, just being random attacks throughout the world, and it was a great change of pace from fighting people on the ground, and they did a lot to make the scale of the game feel bigger. Now, does that make sense lore-wise? Well, Hammerfell directly borders Skyrim, and if this is set after the events of Elder Scrolls V, then yeah, absolutely. The game is set to have 12 to 13 big cities. I think that's a great number. The thing they really need to nail, though, is actually making the cities big. Skyrim suffered from this a lot, because the cities that claim to be big in the lore were actually like 5 houses and a Jarl's hut in the final game, and they just didn't feel like cities at all. Like Falkreath, for example. And with all the years of development and technology, I don't see why that can't be possible. But 12 to 14 I think is a good number and makes sense. Now the next part made some red flags go off. Progression system is much more flexible, abandoning classes for a natural progression and better combat. Now hang on, classes were abandoned a long time ago. Skyrim did not have classes, and even in Oblivion, the leveling was relative to the actions you did in game. So it was never really a class-based leveling system, so that makes me question who gave this information or if this is more so just a wording confusion, which is why we always look at leaks like these with scrutiny, because this could be a red flag pointing to the leak being false. But we'll chalk it up to some wording errors. Now as for better combat, that's just the next obvious step. Even the melee combat in Starfield tried new things, so it is obvious that they are looking for ways to improve. Now how would that manifest in the Elder Scrolls 6? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. The game to have fortress and village building alongside settlement building. Now kind of like the ship combat, this was a feature that we saw in Fallout 4. Now admittedly, I only dabbled in this a little bit. I didn't play a ton of that game, but that is one thing that people were speculating for the longest time we would see make a return in the Elder Scrolls 6, since it's already been tried and tested in their past games. And like I was saying on the point of personal property in the Elder Scrolls games, it would be another cool thing to have to make the world your own. And I think it would be cool to see that make a return. And the final point of this leak, the game will be shown in July 2025. Now I saw a lot of people seeing this and saying, oh yeah, right. That's how we know this leak is false, is because the game is obviously not going to be shown that soon. And to that I say, excuse me, are we forgetting that it's been 7 years since the last trailer? You're telling me they wouldn't have any gameplay to show during that time? And we just talked about in the last video that they do have playable builds of the game ready. So I really don't doubt this. I think that would make a lot of sense. But another thing you may want to consider is if you remember the Oblivion remake leak, that one was also pretty reliable and said that we would see it around summer sometime like July. Now this is very much wishful thinking on my part, but maybe there's some kind of big Bethesda showcase going on where they shadow drop the Oblivion remake and show off some Elder Scrolls 6 gameplay. Now again, like I said, wishful thinking, but Xtasis himself has also claimed to have rumored a Microsoft showcase in June. Now you'd think that if this was legit, they would want to showcase Elder Scrolls 6 gameplay there. But I don't think it's entirely out of the question for Bethesda to do their own showcase if the Microsoft main one is already stacked. And Bethesda does tend to like to do their own thing. So I don't think it's that too far-fetched. Now let me remind you all, this is still just a rumor. This could be entirely false, but it's from a fairly reliable source. But again, as always, please be skeptical. And here's a pretty good reason to be. Everything on this list has already been talked about at length in the communities for a long time. These are all generally common ideas that have been shared, and there's nothing in this leak that you wouldn't find on somebody's educated guess. Honestly, you could put the Elder Scrolls 6 subreddit into ChatGPT and say, hey, based on all this information, what do you think is going to be in the Elder Scrolls 6? And this leak is almost exactly what would pop out. Now, does that mean it's fake? No, but it's just a reason to be skeptical. And there was a 4chan post saying many of these same things a few months ago. Maybe it was the same source that reached out to Xtasis, but again, just be skeptical of all this, please. Now there was another thing going around about somebody claiming to be a member of Bethesda who worked on the art team for a few months on Elder Scrolls 6, but I don't want to get into that leak specifically because it was all deleted after, and that was done for one of two reasons. Either it was very fake and the person got called out and deleted their account, or they got deleted because it was real and there's potential legal stuff going on there, so I'm not going to mess with that. But what do you think about this leak from Xtasis? Do you think it's just an educated guess, or do you think somebody actually does know things about the game and we could be seeing gameplay sometime in July? Y'all let me know down below. But either way, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here. But with all that, I will catch you in the next one.